curriculum for 10 years.
My question is to any and all candidates. Climate change is polling as a top issue this election, and there has been a groundswell of support for climate action. I'm 15 and probably one of the youngest people here, which means for me, climate change is like a very real issue because it's not a futuristic thing for me. It's if the science is correct, which there is now an almost global consensus that it is, climate change is going to have an enormous impact on my life. I want to know what emissions reduction target will be set and met under your policy, and whether or not it will exceed or meet the 45% emissions reductions target by 2030, which has been announced by the UN and the International Intergovernmental Climate Change Panel as the minimum amount required to avoid the breakdown of our climate and the catastrophes that follow that. Thank you.
Let's hear from this dinosaur over here. He never reads the paper, he never looks at the articles about climate change.
Excuse me, sir.
Let's hear from this dinosaur. There.
We have a question, and I'll try and be brief.
No, I've said my pay. I don't want to say anything more. Thank you.
There is a book that Clive Palmer has written called Century at the Gate, about 800 pages, compiling his speeches in Parliament. I quote from page 13, "Climate change is a global problem and it must have a global solution." Page 12, "Australia acting alone cannot change the world, and change the world we must." Page 809, "Committed to continued investment in renewable clean energy." When Clive was in Parliament before, he moved a motion and it was carried to introduce an emissions reduction scheme in Australia and set up the mechanism for it, and that would be activated when our trading partners, USA, Japan, and major other export competitors, committed to the same mechanism of emissions reduction. If we go it alone, we wreck our economy. I have here a thing, Australia emits 1.3% of carbon dioxide. The world is now building or planning 1,600 new coal-fired power stations. So if we shut down our 6, we make no difference. That's why Clive brought Al Gore here and got Australia committed to an international framework that we don't damage ourselves unless we all work together with others that are emitting much more than we are. So please listen carefully to the nuances of what I said. That Clive supports it. He says it's a serious issue, but we must act internationally, because while they're building 1,600 coal-fired power stations, our efforts are futile.
And Clive is also looking to build 4 coal mines in the Galilee Basin right next door to Adani. Should also be made mention of as well. Labor's priority is renewable energy. We recently announced all of our renewable energy plans, and that involves wind, solar, hydro, and also hydrogen, which we see as being a very big part of Australia's future. We're up for the accelerated phase out of coal in Australia, and we're looking to do that in a number of ways. And that's going to be done in an orderly transition, and as we up renewables and we phase out of coal. And we're also going to establish what's called a Just Transitions Authority when we get into government on the 19th of May, and that will help regions impacted by all of the changes, like the Hunter Valley, get out of coal and move to a new clean and green renewable future. Labor's plan is that Australia will be net zero carbon by the middle of the century, sometime between 2040 and 2050. As I said, we regard in climate change as being the biggest social, economic and environmental problem, not just facing the world as a whole, but also our local region as well. And to your question, your specific question about our emissions reduction target, it is 45 degrees, 45% I should say, by 2030, and that's in line with what the Climate Change Authority recommended, and also the Paris Climate Agreement recommended as well. But I will also add that Labor's renewable energy policies and our emission reduction targets will make Australia one of the most ambitious countries in the world when it comes to